Hello friends, I welcome all of you to my YouTube channel. Today our topic is heredity and variation, and this topic heredity and variation it will be covered in 5 different lectures, and today's lecture will mainly focus on the pre-Mendelian genetics. Then subsequent lectures will focus on the Mendelian and the post-Mendelian genetics. First of all, we need to know what heredity is all about. As we all know, we all resemble our parents in one way or the other way. This is all due to heredity. For example, your eye color will resemble either of your parents. For example, two blue-eyed parents will always give rise to a blue-eyed baby. Similarly, the skin color is another example of heredity. In case of plants, we have whether the plant is tall or short, it will be determined by heredity. Similarly, for example, the color of the flower will be determined by heredity. Similarly, the seed type, the genetic diseases, whether you will be susceptible to a particular genetic disease will be determined by heredity. So heredity may be defined as the transmission of characters from one generation to successive generations or from parents to their offsprings. Thus, it is heredity which is the cause of similarities between the offsprings. So, heredity involves the transfer of genetic characters from parents to offsprings via egg and sperm. The maternal characters they are transmitted via egg, while as the paternal characters are transmitted or transferred to the offsprings via the sperm. So you will have half of the genetic material from your mother and half from your father. So again we'll revise this. Heredity may be defined as the transmission of characters from one generation to successive generations or from parents to their offsprings. Now the next term that we need to understand is variation. In the previous slide we observed that the parents and their offsprings they share some similarities. There are similarities. Now there are similarities also between the offsprings of the same parents. However, you will never be able to find out two offsprings that are identical unless and until they are identical twins. Still there will be differences. So the differences that exist between the offsprings and the parents or within the offsprings of the same parents, all these differences they constitute the variations. Thus, variations may be defined as the visible differences between the parents and the offsprings or between the offsprings of the same parent. Now, these variations they are of two types: hereditary variations and the environmental variations. Hereditary variations arise as a result of any change in the structure and function of the gene. They arise as a result of any change in the structure and function of the gene, and as such, they are always inheritable. They are inherited from one generation to another generation. They are inherited from one generation to another generation, and they are known as hereditary variations. Now, for example, the color of your eye, the color of your skin, these are hereditary variations. For example, your eye color may sometimes vary from your parents. Normally the color of the eyes is black, or brown. Now, due to mutation, the color of the eyes in the baby may be blue. It is because of the change in the structure or the function of the gene. When a variation observed within the offsprings of the parent is because of change in the structure and function of the gene, it is known as hereditary variation, and such variations can be transferred from one generation to another generation. Now, second type of variations include the environmental variations. Environment has an important role in shaping the phenotype of an organism. Now, two individuals with same genotype may have different phenotype. What is genotype? It is the genetic makeup of an organism, of an individual, and phenotype, it is the physical appearance. Now, two individuals having the same genotype should actually have same phenotype, but you will see two individuals same genotype may differ in phenotype. Why? Because they are exposed to two different environmental conditions. So environment induces certain changes, certain variations in the phenotype of the organism, but these variations which are induced by this environment are not heritable. They are known as environmental variations, and these are not heritable. We'll revise this again. Variations may be defined as the visible differences between the parents and the offsprings, or between the offsprings of the same parents. Variations are of two types: hereditary variations, which can be transferred from one generation to the next generation, and they result as due to the change in the structure and function of a gene. And second is environmental variations. These variations, they are induced by the environment, and such changes, such variations, they are not heritable. Next is genetics. This word genetics was for the first time coined by William Bateson. William Bateson is one of the renowned geneticists, and he has made a lot of contribution in the field of genetics. And the word genetics is basically derived from the Greek word genesis, meaning origin. And genetics may be defined as the branch of biology concerned with the study of genes, heredity, and variation in the organisms. So heredity as well as variation is studied by genetics. Or we will again revise it. Genetics is a branch of biology concerned with the study of genes, heredity, and variations. In the previous two slides, we got insights about heredity and variation. So the field studying these heredity and variations is known as genetics. Now, any biologist who studies this genetics, who studies genes, heredity, and variation, is known as geneticist. Now, George John Mendel is known as the father of genetics for his contribution in the field of genetics, for discovering the laws of inheritance. Okay, so he's known as father of genetics, and genetics is a branch of biology concerned with the study of genes, heredity, and variations among organisms. Ever since people began to wonder at the world, they asked several questions. Why actually horse always gives birth to a horse? Why pea plants produce peas? Why not other fruits? Why not apples? Why offsprings resemble parents? A number of viewpoints were put forward prior to Mendel to explain the transmission of characters from parents to offspring. So to answer these questions, to answer why a horse always gives rise to a horse, why pea plant always produces peas, why not other fruits? Why parents resemble their offsprings? The scientists before Mendel put forward different theories, different viewpoints, and all these theories they believed in blending inheritance. What's blending inheritance? Blending inheritance means if we have two parents, we have parent A and we have parent B. Now the characters of parent A and B they mix together to form the offspring C. Now according to this the viewpoints that were put forward before Mendel, all these views, all these theories, they were based on blending of inheritance. So what's blending of inheritance is that if we have parent A and we have parent B, the characters of A and B they will mix, they will blend to produce an offspring which will have the blended characters, the mixed characters of A and B. Its phenotype will be somewhat intermediate between A and B. This is known as blending inheritance, which we know today is not true. So according to this theory, if we have two parents with two different types of skin colors, the offspring should always have a skin color which is intermediate of A and B. And today we know that this is not true. And these theories, because they believed in mixing of the characters, they believed in blending of the characters, they were known as theories of blending inheritance. Now the first theory was the Vapour theory, and this Vapour theory it was proposed by Pythagoras. According to this theory, the genetic information of parents was held in vapor released from the male organ. The genetic information required for the development of the offspring is stored in the parents and it was held in vapor released from the male organs, and during coitus, during mating, the vapor condenses in the uterus of the female, forming what would be the fetus. Now according to Pythagoras, this vapor was not an was any ordinary vapor. This vapor was genetically coded vapor. It contained information for the development of the baby. So actually what Pythagoras believed is that the information of the parents was held in the vapor released from the male organism. Now this vapor condenses in the uterus of the female and leading to the formation of the full-fledged individual. So he believed that the vapor was actually a genetically coded vapor which contained information for the development of the offspring. Now the second theory was proposed by Aristotle. Aristotle observed some sort of connection between male semen and menstrual fluid. Male semen and menstrual fluid. Then he believed that menstrual fluid and the male semen had some role in heredity. The menstrual fluid and the male semen had some role in the transmission of the characters. And the blood held genetic coding. The genetic coding was present in the blood, and that male semen was a highly purified form of male's blood, while he considered menstrual fluid as the impure form of the blood. So according to Aristotle, the male semen was the purest form of the blood and the menstrual fluid was the impure blood. Then he believed that the semen comes in contact with the menstrual fluid. Semen comes in contact with the menstrual fluid, and it is the semen that confers, that gives the menstrual fluid the ability to produce the offspring. So there were several points on which the fluid theory of Aristotle was based. First was and that menstrual fluid and male semen, they have role in heredity. Menstrual fluid and the male semen had some role in heredity. Number second, blood held genetic coding. The genetic information for the development of an organism, for the development of the fetus, was present in the blood. Number third, the male semen was highly purified form of blood. So he believed that male semen was highly purified form of blood. Number fourth, he believed that the menstrual fluid was the impure form of the blood. Number fifth, he believed that male semen comes in contact with the menstrual fluid. So as it comes in contact with the menstrual fluid, the male semen confers the female semen. The male semen gives the female semen the ability to produce the whole offspring, to produce the full-fledged organism. This theory is known as fluid theory. It was given by Aristotle. And then there after this there is another theory that's known as the pre-formation theory. And before the pre-formation theory was put forward, it was Leeuwenhoek who for the first time observed male sperm. Actually, Leeuwenhoek used single lens microscopes to observe different types of cells, and he was also the first person to observe the male sperm. And then he believed that each sperm had the potential to give rise to the full-fledged individual, to give rise to the whole human being. And he believed that when the sperm is introduced in the mother's womb, where it can get nourishment, it develops into the full-fledged living organism. Now, based on these observations of uh, Leeuwenhoek, Jan Swammerdam, he was a Dutch scientist. He proposed the theory of pre-formation, and he believed one of the sex cells or gametes, either sperm or egg, contained within itself the entire organism in perfect miniature form, and this miniature form was called as homunculus. If you see this image, I have taken this image from a journal who had published this image on February 7, 1965, and these are the homunculus. So this Swammerdam, he believed that the gametes, be it sperm or egg, they contained little forms of the human beings or miniature forms of the living organisms. And these sperms, they had the ability, this egg cell or the sperm, they had the ability to give rise to the whole individual, and these miniature forms, they were known as homuncules. And later on, this theory was also supported by several scientists, which included Rox, Delpit, Smelfegi, and others. And this theory did receive some attention for some time. Now, the fourth theory is the theory of pangenesis. This theory was proposed by Darwin, and Darwin is the founder of the modern evolutionary theory. And Darwin actually coined the concept of gemmules or pangenes. Pangenes, that's why the name Pangenesis. He believed that these gemmules or pangenes were minute particles of inheritance thrown up by all cells of the body, and then these gemmules would aggregate in the reproductive organs. These gemmules would aggregate in the reproductive organs of parents to be passed on to their offsprings. So this Darwin, he believed that the gammules were produced by all cells of the body of the parents, and then they aggregated within the reproductive structures of the parents, and then accordingly they were passed on to the offsprings. And he also believed that these gammules, they uh, could be modified, they could be modified by the organism's environment. So an environment has an effect on the gammules, so the gammules can may be modified by the environment, and these changes then can be transferred to the offsprings. But as we saw in the earlier slides, that the environmental induced changes are not inheritable, but at that time Mendel believed that the changes that were induced on the gammules by environment were inheritable. Now, uh, all these theories that we studied so far, they all believed in the blending of inheritance. We explained what the blending of inheritance is, but I will revise it again. So for example, if we have two parents, we have parent A and we have parent B. Now this parent A and parent B, they have some characters. Now if they produce an offspring, let's say offspring C. Now according to blending inheritance, the offspring C should have characters which are intermediate of A and B. For example, if A is fair skinned and B is dark skinned, C should have skin color which is intermediate between A and B. This is known as blending inheritance. Now there were several objections to these theories of blending inheritance that we studied in the previous slides. First is the trait of sex does not blend in itself in unisexual organisms. For example, if we have individual A and we have for example male and female. Now in the offspring of these two parents will either be male or female. It cannot be both, it cannot be both. So here there is no blending. In blending inheritance, the offspring should have been somewhat intermediate between A and B, but today we observe the offspring of the unisexual organisms is either male or female under normal conditions. Now, children of dark and fair colored parents should be intermediate of the color if blending inheritance is true. Now, if we have fair colored parent and black colored parent, the offspring should actually have the intermediate color. But we see this is not true. The children often of different colors. For example, they may be fair colored, some may be dark colored, and others may be of intermediate color. So it's not necessary that they should always show blending of the characters. Now, many individuals show ancestral characters. Now, as per blending inheritance, the offspring should always show the characters of the parents, and these characters should be the blended characters, mixed characters, intermediate between A and B. But many individuals we see show ancestral characters. For example, some babies have short tail, which is the ancestral character, which is not present in their immediate parents. This is known as atavism. Or for example, some persons can move the external ear or pinna. So this is the ancestral character, which is known as atavism. This is not explained by the blending inheritance. So according to blending inheritance, the characters of the offspring should be intermediate between A and C. Here we observe that the offspring shows ancestral characters which are not even found in the immediate parents. Similarly, in case of zigzag inheritance, or in some cases the children or some characters appear in the children that are not found in immediate parents but are similar to one or other grandparents. So the characters remain hidden in one generation, then they appear in the next generation. For example is the zigzag inheritance. So this is another objection to the blending inheritance. Another objection is that a scientist called John Goss, he crossed yellow and green seeded pea varieties. So according to the blending inheritance, if you cross yellow and green seeded pea varieties, the offspring should be somewhat intermediate between yellow and green seeded pea varieties. So the offspring should have seeds which are somewhat intermediate between yellow and green color. But he observed that the hybrids were all yellow seeded. The F1 hybrids were all yellow seeded, so they were not intermediate. And when they were self-pollinated, they produced yellow seeds, they produced green seeds, and they produced some plants with both yellow and green seeds. So this is another objection to the blending inheritance. These were some of the objections of the theories that we studied earlier, and this led to the development of the new era of genetics that's known as the Mendelian genetics, which we will study in the next lecture.